The autumn wind whistled through the wooden structures of Riverdale Station, carrying with it the scent of approaching winter as Charlotte Zimmerman clutched her threadbare shawl tighter around her shoulders. Her third night sleeping on the hard bench at this remote Colorado depot had left her feeling more alone than she'd ever been in her 22 years of life. Charlotte's eyes fluttered open at the sound of approaching hoofbeats, her heart racing with equal parts hope and fear. The last 3 days had taught her caution. Several men had approached her already, none of them the husband-to-be she'd traveled over 1,000 miles to meet. "Miss, you all right there?" The deep voice startled her fully awake. Charlotte straightened her wrinkled traveling dress as she took in the tall figure silhouetted against the rising sun. A cowboy, broad-shouldered and trail-worn, stood regarding her with concern etched across his sun-bronzed face. "I'm waiting for someone," she said quickly, her voice cracking from disuse and thirst. My intended, Mr. Nathan Gray of Wilcox." The man's expression changed immediately. "Nathan Gray, from the Double G Ranch." When she nodded, he removed his hat, revealing sandy brown hair. "Miss, I'm afraid you're at the wrong depot. Wilcox is 20 miles west of here." Charlotte felt the blood drain from her face. "Wrong depot, but I followed the instructions precisely." "I'm Noah Garrison," he said gently. "Nate Gray's neighbor. He's been in quite a state these past days, thinking you'd changed your mind." His eyes softened. "He rode to Denver yesterday looking for you." Charlotte's trembling hand covered her mouth as tears welled in her eyes. 3 days, she whispered. "I've been waiting here for 3 days." Noah Garrison knelt before her, his weathered hands respectfully kept to himself. "Miss Zimmerman, I presume? I'm headed back to Wilcox now. I'd be honored to escort you to your intended." Charlotte hesitated only a moment before nodding. What choice did she have? Her money was gone, her food as well. And there was something in this cowboy's clear blue eyes that inspired trust. Neither could have known then that this chance encounter at the wrong depot would alter both their lives forever. The year was 1885, and the Colorado Territory had only recently achieved statehood. The journey west had been Charlotte's desperate gamble, the final hope for a young woman with no family and diminishing prospects in Philadelphia. The newspaper advertisement had seemed like providence. Respected cattle rancher seeks bride of good character, comfortable home provided. Noah helped Charlotte gather her single trunk and small carpet bag. "When's the last time you had a proper meal, Miss Zimmerman?" Charlotte felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Yesterday morning. I've been conserving my resources." Noah's jaw tightened as he led her to a small eatery adjacent to the depot. "We'll have breakfast before setting out," he said, his tone brooking no argument. "The trail to Wilcox is rough in places." As they ate a simple meal of eggs and biscuits, Charlotte studied Noah Garrison covertly. He was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps 28 or 29, with the lean, muscular build of a man who spent his days in the saddle. Unlike many men she'd encountered on her journey, his manner was respectful, his speech educated despite the Western drawl. "How do you know Mr. Gray?" she asked, finally breaking the silence. "Our ranches share a boundary line. Been neighbors 5 years now." Noah poured her more coffee. "He's a good man. Quiet sort. Lost his wife to fever 4 years back." Charlotte nodded, though her stomach tightened with apprehension. She had known her intended was a widower, but hearing it confirmed made her marriage arrangement feel suddenly, uncomfortably real. "You're wondering if you've made a mistake," Noah observed quietly. Charlotte stiffened. "I've made my choice, Mr. Garrison." "Noah, please." His smile transformed his face, softening the lines around his eyes. "And I meant no offense. Coming west alone takes courage. Nate will appreciate that." After breakfast, Noah loaded Charlotte's trunk onto his wagon and helped her onto the bench seat. "I apologize for not having a proper carriage. The wagon's more practical for ranch work." "I'm grateful for the ride, Mr. Noah," Charlotte replied, arranging her skirts. "I feared I might be stranded here indefinitely." As they left the small settlement behind, the vastness of the landscape took Charlotte's breath away. The rolling prairie stretched toward distant mountains, the October sun casting long shadows across golden grasses. Nothing in Philadelphia had prepared her for such openness, such freedom. "It's beautiful," she murmured, almost to herself. Noah glanced at her with surprise. "Most Easterners find it desolate at first." "It's honest," Charlotte replied. "There's no pretense to it." They traveled for several hours, Noah pointing out landmarks and sharing stories of the territory. Charlotte found herself relaxing in his company, her anxiety about meeting Nathan Gray temporarily forgotten. "May I ask why you decided to become a mail-order bride?" Noah asked eventually, his tone careful. "You seem well-spoken, educated." Charlotte stared at her gloved hands. "My father died last winter. He was a bookkeeper, left debts I couldn't pay on a seamstress's wages." She swallowed hard. "There were limited options for a woman alone." Noah nodded, asking no more questions, for which Charlotte was grateful. Her decision to answer the advertisement had come after months of increasing desperation, after watching other young women in her situation make far worse choices for survival. By midday, they stopped to rest the horses by a small creek. Noah handed Charlotte a canteen and some jerky from his saddlebag before tending to the animals. "How much farther to Wilcox?" she asked, watching him check the horses' hooves with practiced hands. "We'll be there by sundown," Noah replied. "Town's not much general store, saloon, small church. Most folks live on scattered ranches." "And Mr. Gray's ranch, is it large?" Noah straightened, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Double GTKS, a good operation. 100 head of cattle, solid house." "Nothing fancy, but he's built it well." Charlotte nodded, trying to imagine her new life. "And yours?" A shadow crossed Noah's face. "Smaller place, running it alone since my father passed 2 years ago." "I'm sorry for your loss," Charlotte said softly. "It's the way of things out here," he replied, though his eyes revealed more grief than his words admitted. They continued their journey, the wagon jolting over increasingly rugged terrain. Charlotte found herself clutching the wooden seat when they forded a shallow river, the water splashing perilously close to her feet. "Sorry about that," Noah said, steadying her with a brief touch to her elbow. "Spring melt makes this crossing treacherous, but October's usually tame enough." "It's fine," Charlotte assured him, though her heart raced at the brief contact. "I'll need to become accustomed to such things if I'm to be a rancher's wife." Noah's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Yes, I suppose you will." As afternoon deepened toward evening, Charlotte's nerves returned. "Tell me about Nathan Gray," she requested. His letters were informative but not particularly revealing. Noah considered her question carefully. "Nate's 42, came west from Ohio after the war. Works hard, attends church regular, doesn't drink much." He hesitated. "He's not one for many words, but he's fair-minded." Charlotte noted what Noah didn't say. There was no mention of warmth, of humor, of kindness, though perhaps these weren't qualities men typically remarked upon in each other. "His first wife, did they have children?" she asked. "A son who died with his mother, influenza." Noah's voice was gentle. It hit him hard. Took a long while for him to consider remarrying. The sun was low in the sky when they crested a hill, and Noah pointed to a cluster of buildings in the distance. "Wilcox," he announced. Charlotte's hands twisted nervously in her lap. "What if he's still in Denver looking for me? Word travels fast out here." Likely someone's already told him I rode out to Riverdale this morning. Noah glanced at her. You should know, folks will be curious. New faces are rare, especially a bride. Charlotte straightened her spine. I understand. The small town emerged from the growing dusk, a wide dirt street lined with wooden buildings, a few oil lamps already glowing in windows. People paused in their evening activities to watch the wagon roll past, and Charlotte felt their curious gazes like physical touch. Noah pulled the wagon to a stop outside a whitewashed building with a sign declaring it Wilcox Hotel and Dining. We'll get you settled here for tonight, he said. If Nate's not back yet, best you have a proper rest before meeting him. Before Charlotte could respond, a stout woman in an apron burst through the hotel's front door. Noah Garrison, is this her then? The bride we've been hearing about. She bustled forward, her weathered face creased in a welcoming smile. Mrs. Potter, this is Miss Charlotte Zimmerman, Noah introduced them. Charlotte, Edith Potter owns the hotel. You poor dear, we've been worried sick. When Mr. Gray came through yesterday in such a state, saying you never arrived in Denver, Mrs. Potter reached for Charlotte's hand. Come inside. You must be exhausted. Charlotte allowed herself to be led toward the hotel, glancing back at Noah, who had begun unloading her trunk. Will you, she began, uncertain what she was asking. I'll see to your things, then find out if Nate's returned, Noah assured her. You're in good hands with Mrs. Potter. Inside the small hotel, Mrs. Potter guided Charlotte to a tidy sitting room. I'll have a bath sent up to your room and dinner after. You look dead on your feet, poor lamb. You're very kind, Charlotte murmured, overwhelmed by the woman's effusive welcome. Nonsense. We take care of our own out here. Mrs. Potter poured her a cup of tea. Now Noah found you at Riverdale Station. That's a good 30 miles off course. Charlotte explained her confusion with the railway connections, her exhaustion making the words tumble out inelegantly. 3 days on that hard bench. It's a wonder you weren't accosted. A pretty young thing like you alone. Mrs. Potter clicked her tongue. Providence sent Noah your way, that's certain. Charlotte sipped her tea, not trusting herself to comment. Providence indeed, or some other force she couldn't yet name. Later, refreshed by a hot bath and a simple but satisfying dinner, Charlotte stood by the window of her small room, watching the quiet street below. A few men congregated outside the saloon across the way, their laughter carrying on the night air. Otherwise, Wilcox seemed to retire early. A knock at her door startled her. Miss Zimmerman, it's Noah. Charlotte opened the door to find him standing in the narrow hallway, hat in hand. In the lamplight, she noticed a small scar above his right eyebrow, a detail hidden earlier by his hat and the bright daylight. Any word of Mr. Gray? She asked, keeping her voice low. He's expected tomorrow. Telegram came from Denver an hour ago. Noah shifted his weight. I wanted to let you know before I head back to my ranch. Charlotte felt a curious mixture of relief and disappointment. Another day's reprieve before meeting her future husband. Thank you for everything today, she said sincerely. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't found me. Just being neighborly, Noah replied, though something in his gaze suggested more complex feelings. Mrs. Potter will look after you, Well, I'm sure I'll see you again once you're settled at Double G. Charlotte nodded, suddenly aware of their isolation in the quiet hallway. Good night, then, she whispered. Noah placed his hat back on his head, touching the brim in a respectful gesture. Good night, Miss Zimmerman. She closed the door softly after he departed, leaning against it as an unexpected wave of emotion washed over her. Exhaustion, she told herself firmly. Nothing more than exhaustion after days of anxiety and discomfort. Outside, Noah Garrison mounted his horse and rode slowly out of town, his thoughts troubled in ways he couldn't articulate even to himself. Morning brought a flurry of activity to Charlotte's door. Mrs. Potter arrived with hot water and breakfast, followed by the dressmaker who'd heard about the new arrival and insisted on offering her services. "Your traveling clothes are lovely, dear, but you'll want something special for meeting your intended," the older woman explained, measuring tape in hand. Charlotte allowed herself to be measured and questioned about fabric preferences, though she protested the expense. "I haven't the funds for new garments just yet." Mr. Gray left instructions that anything you needed was to be charged to his account, Mrs. Potter informed her. "He's quite eager to make a good impression, it seems." This information both reassured and unnerved Charlotte. The man she'd exchanged letters with for 6 months remained a mystery, yet he'd thought to provide for her comfort even in his absence. After selecting fabric for a new dress, a practical day dress in a becoming shade of blue, that the dressmaker promised would be ready by afternoon, Charlotte ventured outside to explore the town. Wilcox proved even smaller than it had appeared the previous evening. A general store, the hotel, a combination post office and telegraph office, a small schoolhouse, and the inevitable saloon. At the far end of the main street stood a simple white church. Several people nodded greetings as she passed, their curious glances mostly friendly. Charlotte stopped at the general store, browsing the shelves of canned goods, tools, and fabrics, familiarizing herself with the supplies available in her new home. "You must be Miss Zimmerman," said a voice behind her. Charlotte turned to find a man of about 50 regarding her with interest. "Harold Jenkins," he introduced himself. "I run this establishment. Anything you can't find on the shelves, you just let me know. We get supply wagons monthly from Denver." "Thank you, Mr. Jenkins." Charlotte smiled, grateful for the warm reception. "I'm just acquainting myself with what's available." "Nathan Gray's a fortunate man," Jenkins remarked. "Been too long alone since Mary passed." "Ranch that size needs a woman's touch." Charlotte nodded, uncertain how to respond to such personal observations from a stranger. Back east, such familiarity would have been considered shocking. "How many people live in Wilcox?" she asked, changing the subject. "Town proper's only about 30 souls, but there's another 100 or so on surrounding ranches and homesteads. We're growing, though. Railroad's been good for business." Jenkins gestured to a barrel of nails. "Folks building new homes every season." Charlotte continued her tour of the town, eventually finding herself at the church. The simple wooden building with its modest steeple reminded her of the parish church of her childhood before her family had moved to Philadelphia. On impulse, she tried the door and found it unlocked. Inside, sunlight filtered through plain glass windows, illuminating rough-hewn pews and a simple altar. Charlotte slipped into a back pew, the familiar sense of beeswax and wood polish comforting her. "Seeking guidance," Charlotte startled at the gentle voice. A middle-aged man in a clerical collar stood in the side doorway. "Just a moment of quiet," she admitted. "You're Nathan Gray's intended." It wasn't a question. "I'm Pastor Wilson. Welcome to Wilcox." "Thank you, Pastor." Charlotte wondered if there was anyone in town who didn't already know her business. The clergyman seemed to read her thoughts. "Small communities have few secrets, Miss Zimmerman, but they also offer great support when needed." He moved toward the front of the church. "Nathan attends services regularly. A good man who's known sorrow. I pray you'll find happiness together." Charlotte remained in the church after Pastor Wilson excused himself, her thoughts tumultuous. Everyone spoke well of Nathan Gray, yet she felt no closer to knowing the man who would become her husband. Instead, her mind kept returning to Noah Garrison's kind eyes and the strange comfort she'd felt in his presence. "This is madness," she whispered to herself, rising from the pew. One day of acquaintance means nothing. By late afternoon, Charlotte returned to the hotel to find a package waiting her new dress, completed as promised. The blue cotton fabric was of good quality, the stitching neat and sturdy. Mrs. Potter helped her try it on, making small adjustments to the fit. "There now," the older woman said approvingly. "A proper first impression." Charlotte examined her reflection in the small mirror. The dress was simpler than those she'd worn in Philadelphia, but becoming nonetheless, with its fitted bodice and practical skirt suitable for country living. Mr. Gray's wagon was spotted on the North Road, Mrs. Potter informed her as she pinned a loose seam. He should arrive within the hour. Charlotte's heart began to race. The moment she'd both anticipated and dreaded was finally at hand. "Perhaps I could wait in the sitting room," she suggested, not wanting their first meeting to be observed by the entire town. Mrs. Potter agreed, ushering her downstairs once she was properly attired. The sitting room, separated from the small dining area by a folding screen, offered at least the illusion of privacy. Charlotte perched on the edge of a horsehair sofa, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Through the window, she could see the main street of Wilcox, now busy with end-of-day activity as workers returned from fields and ranches. A wagon pulled by two sturdy horses appeared at the far end of the street. Even at a distance, Charlotte could tell the driver was not Noah. This man was stockier, his shoulders slightly hunched as he handled the reins. She felt a strange hollowness in her stomach. The wagon stopped outside the hotel. Charlotte rose as footsteps sounded on the porch, followed by a murmured conversation with Mrs. Potter in the foyer. Then the sitting room door opened, and Nathan Gray stood before her. He was not what she had expected. From their correspondence, Charlotte had imagined someone more imposing. Instead, Nathan Gray was of medium height and build, his dark hair streaked with gray at the temples. His face, weathered by sun and wind, bore the lines of someone who smiled rarely. Yet his brown eyes were kind as they took in her appearance. "Miss Zimmerman," he said, his voice deeper than she'd anticipated. "I'm glad to find you safe." "Mr. Gray," Charlotte acknowledged, extending her hand as protocol demanded. "I must apologize for the confusion with my arrival." He took her hand briefly, his calloused palm rough against her skin. "No apology needed. The fault is mine for not providing clearer instructions." His speech was careful, each word seemingly measured before delivery. An awkward silence fell between them. Charlotte searched for something to say, acutely aware that this man was to be her husband, yet he remained a stranger. "Your journey west, was it difficult?" Nathan finally asked, removing his hat and turning it in his hands. "Parts of it," Charlotte admitted, "but the landscape is magnificent, unlike anything I've seen before." Nathan nodded, a faint smile touching his lips. "It grows on you. I couldn't imagine living elsewhere now." Mrs. Potter tactfully brought tea, then withdrew, leaving them in relative privacy, though Charlotte was certain the woman remained within earshot. "Noah Garrison told me he found you at Riverdale Station," Nathan said after they were settled with their tea. "You must have been frightened, alone in a strange place." "I managed," Charlotte replied, not wanting to appear helpless. "Mr. Garrison was very kind to bring me to Wilcox." Nathan's expression warmed slightly. "Noah's a good neighbor, one of the best men I know." Charlotte sipped her tea, wondering how to navigate this conversation. In Philadelphia, courtship followed established patterns. Here, she was already committed to this man through their exchange of letters, yet they were only just becoming acquainted in person. "Mr. Gray, Nathan, please," he interrupted gently. "If we're to be married, formality seems unnecessary." "Nathan," Charlotte amended. "Our arrangement was." Specific. But I want to be clear that I intend to fulfill my obligations as a wife. I'm not afraid of hard work. Nathan set down his cup, studying her with newfound intensity. Miss Zimmerman, Charlotte, I want you to understand something. Our arrangement, as you call it, needn't proceed if you've had second thoughts. I wouldn't hold you to it. Charlotte stared at him in surprise. Are you releasing me from our agreement? No, he said quickly. That's not what I meant, only that. He paused, searching for words. Marriage should be entered willingly. You traveled far based on letters alone. Now that we've met, if you find me unsuitable, I would understand. The unexpected consideration in his offer touched Charlotte deeply. This man could have simply claimed her as his bride by right of their agreement, yet he was offering her a choice. I appreciate your concern, she said carefully, but I made my decision with open eyes. Unless you've changed your mind, Nathan shook his head. No, I would be honored to have you as my wife. Relief washed over Charlotte, though whether it stemmed from securing her future or from Nathan's decent character, she couldn't quite determine. Then perhaps we should discuss practical matters, she suggested, finding firmer ground in logistics. When should the wedding take place? They agreed on a ceremony in 2 weeks' time, allowing Charlotte opportunity to settle and become familiar with Wilcox before taking her vows. Nathan would continue preparations at his ranch while Charlotte remained at the hotel, an arrangement that satisfied propriety while giving them both breathing room. As their conversation drew to a close, Nathan hesitantly covered her hand with his. The gesture was respectful rather than passionate, but Charlotte recognized it as a tentative first step toward the intimacy that would eventually be expected between them. I'll call on you tomorrow, Nathan promised as he rose to leave. Perhaps we could ride out to see the ranch, if the weather holds. Charlotte agreed, walking with him to the hotel entrance. Several townspeople lingered nearby, pretending not to observe their interaction. Nathan seemed oblivious to the attention as he bid her good night with a formal bow. After he departed, Charlotte returned to her room, her emotions in turmoil. Nathan Gray seemed kind and honorable, everything his letters had suggested. Yet she felt no spark, no immediate connection such as the novels of her youth had promised. Perhaps that would come with time and familiarity. Or perhaps, whispered a treacherous voice in her mind, such connections happened instantly, as she'd felt with Noah Garrison. Charlotte pushed the thought away firmly. Noah had been kind to a stranded traveler, nothing more. Her future lay with Nathan Gray, and she would honor her commitment. The following morning brought clear skies and mild temperatures, perfect weather for riding to the Double G Ranch. Nathan arrived promptly at 10 o'clock with a wagon, helping Charlotte aboard with careful hands. I thought you might like to bring some personal items to leave at the house, he explained, to make it feel more like your home before the wedding. The thoughtfulness of this suggestion surprised Charlotte. Thank you, that's very considerate. As they left Wilcox behind, Nathan pointed out landmarks and property boundaries, familiarizing her with the area that would become her home. Unlike Noah's easy conversation, Nathan's commentary was factual and sparse, but Charlotte appreciated his effort. The winter wheat looks promising this year, he observed, gesturing toward fields they passed. Good snow cover last winter meant plenty of moisture in the soil. Charlotte recognized his attempt to include her in the practical aspects of ranch life. Do you grow much of your own grain, or do you purchase feed for the winter? Her question seemed to please him. Both. We harvest enough to see most of the herd through winter, but in harsh years, we supplement from outside. The railroads made that easier. They traveled for nearly an hour before Nathan pointed to a cluster of buildings nestled in a shallow valley. Double G, he announced, a note of pride evident in his voice. Charlotte studied her future home with interest. The main house was larger than she'd expected, a two-story structure built of sturdy logs with a proper shingled roof. Several outbuildings surrounded it: a barn, bunkhouse, smokehouse, and what appeared to be a workshop. Corrals and fenced pastures extended from the main buildings, though the cattle were currently grazing on distant hillsides. "It's impressive," she said honestly. "You've built all this yourself." "Started with just the cabin portion," Nathan explained, pointing to the central section of the house. "Added on as the herd grew, the upper floor was meant for—" He stopped abruptly. "For children," Charlotte finished quietly, understanding his hesitation. "With your first wife." Nathan nodded, his expression shuddering briefly before he forced a smile. "Shall we go inside, Mrs. Watkins has been preparing for your visit." As they approached the house, a plump woman of about 60 emerged onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. "Mrs. Watkins keeps house for me 3 days a week," Nathan explained. "She and her husband have a homestead nearby." "So this is the bride?" Mrs. Watkins exclaimed, beaming at Charlotte. "Aren't you a pretty thing? Come in, come in. I've just taken bread from the oven." The interior of the house revealed Nathan's prosperity and good taste. The furnishings were solid and well made, if not luxurious. A stone fireplace dominated the main room, with comfortable chairs arranged before it. Bookshelves lined one wall, a pleasant surprise that suggested Nathan valued reading. "Your library is impressive," Charlotte remarked, examining the titles. Many were practical volumes on agriculture and animal husbandry, but she noted several novels and books of poetry as well. "Mary loved to read," Nathan said softly. Then, more briskly, "Please consider the collection yours. I've little time for reading these days." Mrs. Watkins bustled them into the dining room where she'd laid out fresh bread, butter, and preserves. As they ate, Nathan described the routine of the ranch, the seasonal work, and the staff he employed: 2 full-time ranch hands who lived in the bunkhouse, and additional help during calving and roundup. "And where would my duties lie?" Charlotte asked directly. Nathan seemed taken aback by the question. "Your duties?" "Yes, as your wife and the mistress of this home." Charlotte met his gaze steadily. "I assume you have expectations beyond companionship, Mrs. Watkins, who had been hovering nearby, suddenly found pressing business in the kitchen. Nathan cleared his throat. "The house, certainly. Meal preparation when Mrs. Watkins isn't here. Perhaps a kitchen garden come spring." He hesitated. "Beyond that, whatever interests you." "I wouldn't presume to dictate your activities." Charlotte nodded, relieved by his reasonable expectations. Some mail-order brides found themselves virtual slaves upon arrival, expected to work from dawn until dusk without complaint. After their meal, Nathan showed her the rest of the house. The upper floor contained 3 bedrooms, a master bedroom, sparsely furnished with a large bed and chest of drawers, and 2 smaller rooms that stood empty save for basic bed frames. "I thought you might want to choose furnishings for these rooms yourself," Nathan explained, gesturing to the empty spaces. "Denver has good cabinet makers, or catalogs if you prefer." Charlotte understood the unspoken meaning. These would be children's rooms, should they be so blessed. The thought both warmed and unsettled her. "The house is lovely," she said truthfully as they descended the stairs. "You've created a beautiful home here." Nathan's expression softened. "It needs a woman's touch. It's been too long without one." The vulnerability in his admission touched Charlotte. This man had suffered loss and solitude, yet had found the courage to reach out for companionship again. They spent the remainder of the afternoon exploring the property. Nathan showed her the gardens, now mostly dormant with the approach of winter, and introduced her to the ranch hand's Jim Perkins, a leathery old cowboy who'd been with Nathan from the beginning, and Eduardo Mendez, a younger man who managed the horses with exceptional skill. By late afternoon, dark clouds were gathering on the horizon. "We should start back," Nathan observed. "Looks like weather coming in." They had just loaded Charlotte's selections, some books, needlework, and personal items to leave at the ranch into the wagon when horsemen appeared on the road leading to the main house. "That's Noah," Nathan said, recognizing the lead rider. "Wonder what brings him over." Charlotte felt an unexpected flutter in her stomach at the mention of Noah's name, a reaction she immediately tried to suppress. Noah Garrison rode toward them, accompanied by one of his ranch hands. He tipped his hat to Charlotte before addressing Nathan. "Thought you should know Mitchell's reporting cattle missing from his north pasture. Could be strays, but he found cut fencing." Nathan's expression darkened. "Rustlers, you think?" "Can't say for certain. Wanted to give you the warning, case you need to move your herd closer to home." Noah glanced at Charlotte. "Miss Zimmerman, good to see you again. You look well." "Thank you, Mr. Garrison." Charlotte was dismayed to hear her voice sounding slightly breathless. "I'm grateful for your assistance yesterday." Noah dismounted, joining them near the wagon. "Nate giving you the grand tour. Indeed. The double G is impressive." Charlotte smoothed her skirts nervously. "Nate's built something special here," Noah agreed, his tone genuinely admiring. "Best managed herd in the county." Nathan looked pleased by the compliment. "You'll stay for supper." "Mrs. Watkins made plenty." Noah shook his head. "Better get back. Got fences to check before dark if Mitchell's right about rustlers." He turned to Charlotte. "Settling in all right at Mrs. Potter's?" "Yes, thank you. Everyone's been very welcoming." Noah's smile transformed his face, creating crinkles at the corners of his eyes. "Wilcox is good that way. Small but decent folk." As Noah remounted his horse, the first raindrops began to fall. "You'd best hurry," he advised, nodding toward the darkening sky. "Storm's moving fast." Nathan helped Charlotte into the wagon and they set off toward town, the horses moving at a brisk trot ahead of the approaching weather. They were still several miles from Wilcox when the skies opened, rain pouring down in drenching sheets. "There's a line shack just ahead," Nathan shouted over the downpour, steering the horses off the main road. "We can wait it out there." The small cabin appeared through the rain little more than a one-room shelter used by cowboys monitoring distant pastures. Nathan hurried Charlotte inside before seeing to the horses, tethering them beneath a lean-to attached to the cabin side. When he rejoined her, Nathan was soaked to the skin, water streaming from his hat and coat. "Sorry about this," he said, removing his dripping outerwear. "These autumn storms usually blow through quickly." The cabin was sparsely furnished with a small stove, rough table, 2 chairs, and a narrow cot. Nathan quickly lit the stove with supplies from a box beside it, the small flame providing both light and warmth in the dim interior. Charlotte removed her sodden shawl, acutely aware of the impropriety of their situation. Alone in a remote cabin, unchaperoned in Philadelphia, such circumstances would have meant certain scandal. Nathan seemed equally conscious of their predicament. He kept a respectful distance, busying himself with the stove and checking supplies. "There's coffee," he said, holding up a tin. "And jerky. Not much of a meal, but it would warm us." Charlotte agreed, grateful for the task that occupied his hands and attention. As Nathan prepared the simple refreshments, she took the opportunity to study him unobserved. In the intimate confines of the cabin, with rain drumming on the roof above them, she could see details she'd missed earlier. The slight tremor in his hands when he spoke of his late wife. The careful way he moved, as if accustomed to containing himself within strict boundaries. The occasional glance in her direction, quickly averted when she might notice. Nathan Gray was a man who had learned to live with loss, she realized. His reserve wasn't coldness but self-protection. "Thank you," she said as he handed her a tin cup of steaming coffee. "Not just for this for today, for showing me the ranch and explaining your life there so patiently." Nathan looked surprised by her gratitude. "It's your right to know what you're agreeing to." "Nevertheless, you've been considerate of my feelings." Charlotte sipped the strong coffee. "I appreciate that." A faint flush colored Nathan's weathered cheeks. "I want you to be happy, Miss Zimmerman. I know our arrangement is unusual, but I hope in time you might find contentment at Double G." The honesty of this statement moved Charlotte. "I believe I will," she replied softly. The rain continued unabated, filling the small cabin with its rhythmic patter. Nathan checked the window periodically, but the storm showed no signs of relenting. "We may be here some time," he finally admitted. "I apologize for the discomfort." "It's hardly your fault," Charlotte assured him, "and I'm not uncomfortable. The cabin is quite snug." Nathan settled in the chair opposite her, his large frame making the crude furniture seem smaller. For a time they sat in silence, the stove's warmth gradually drying their damp clothing. "May I ask you something?" Charlotte ventured after a while. Nathan nodded, his expression open. "In your letters, you mentioned wanting children." Charlotte forced herself to maintain eye contact despite her embarrassment at such a direct question. "Is that still your hope?" Something flickered in Nathan's eyes, pain mixed with yearning. "Yes," he answered simply, "though I understand if you've reconsidered that aspect of marriage." "I haven't," Charlotte assured him quickly. "I've always wanted a family." It was true, though she'd nearly abandoned that dream during her desperate months in Philadelphia. Relief softened Nathan's features. "I'm glad to hear it." The conversation flowed more easily after that, turning to their respective childhoods. Nathan's on an Ohio farm, Charlotte's in a small Pennsylvania town before her family moved to Philadelphia. They discovered shared values: hard work, honesty, the importance of education. By the time the rain finally slackened, Charlotte felt she knew Nathan Gray better than weeks of formal courtship might have allowed. The enforced intimacy of the storm had broken through barriers that might otherwise have taken months to dismantle. It was nearly dark when they reached Wilcox, the muddy streets glistening in the light from windows. Nathan escorted Charlotte to the hotel entrance, both of them bedraggled despite their attempt to wait out the worst of the storm. "I'd like to call on you tomorrow if I may," Nathan said as they paused at the door. "There's a social at the church Saturday evening. Perhaps you'd accompany me." Charlotte agreed readily, recognizing the opportunity to meet more of the community that would become her home. "Until tomorrow, then." Nathan hesitated, then awkwardly raised her hand to his lips in a formal gesture that nonetheless represented a significant step in their relationship. Charlotte watched him walk back to his wagon, conflicting emotions swirling within her. Nathan Gray was everything his letters had promised: honorable, established, kind in his quiet way. She could build a good life with such a man. Yet, as she turned to enter the hotel, Charlotte caught sight of a familiar figure across the street. Noah Garrison stood in the doorway of the general store, his gaze following Nathan's departure before shifting to her. Even at this distance, the intensity of his look sent an unexpected warmth through her rain-chilled body. Noah raised his hand in a brief greeting, then disappeared into the store. Charlotte hurried inside, disturbed by her reaction to that simple acknowledgement. "Just fatigue," she murmured to herself as she climbed the stairs to her room, "and the strain of new surroundings." But as Charlotte prepared for bed that night, her thoughts continued to drift between the two men: Nathan with his steady reliability and Noah with his easy smile and kind eyes. "This is madness," she told her reflection firmly. "You've made your choice. Honor it." The following days established a pattern. Nathan called on Charlotte each morning, gradually introducing her to more of Wilcox's residents. In the afternoons, she often accompanied Mrs. Potter or the dressmaker on errands, learning the rhythms of the small community. Charlotte found herself welcomed with genuine warmth. Unlike Philadelphia, where her reduced circumstances had made her nearly invisible, in Wilcox her status as Nathan Gray's intended gave her immediate standing. Women invited her to quilting circles and asked her opinion on preserves. Men tipped their hats respectfully as she passed. Only Noah Garrison maintained a careful distance. Though Charlotte occasionally glimpsed him in town, he seemed to deliberately avoid situations where they might converse privately. When they did encounter each other in Nathan's company, Noah was unfailingly polite but reserved. Charlotte told herself this was for the best, even as she found her gaze following him whenever he appeared. Saturday evening arrived clear and cool. Nathan collected Charlotte for the church social in his best wagon, now equipped with a proper bench seat cushioned for comfort. He too had made an effort with his appearance, wearing a clean shirt and string tie beneath his good wool coat. The church hall was festively decorated with autumn leaves and lanterns. Nearly everyone from Wilcox and the surrounding ranches had turned out, creating a lively atmosphere as neighbors caught up on news and shared the bounty of recent harvests. Pastor Wilson formally introduced Charlotte to the congregation, and she endured the curious scrutiny with as much grace as she could muster. Nathan remained attentively by her side, quietly identifying people and explaining connections. Mrs. Fairchild, there was Mary's closest friend, he murmured at one point. She's been asking to call on you. Charlotte noticed the older woman watching them with undisguised interest. I'd welcome her visit, she replied. Understanding this was part of being accepted into Nathan's existing relationships. As the evening progressed, the gathering turned to music. Several men produced instruments of fiddle, harmonica, and guitar while benches were pushed aside to create space for dancing. Nathan hesitated as couples began forming sets for a country reel. I'm not much of a dancer, he admitted. Mary always complained I had 2 left feet. I'd be happy to sit and listen, Charlotte assured him, touched by his self-consciousness. Before Nathan could respond, Mrs. Potter appeared at their side. Nathan Gray, don't you dare deprive this girl of dancing on her first social. The older woman turned to Charlotte. He's being modest. He dances just fine when properly motivated. Nathan looked both embarrassed and amused by Mrs. Potter's interference. Would you care to dance, Charlotte? He asked, offering his hand. The simple country dance was easy to follow, and Charlotte soon found herself enjoying the lively music and movement. Nathan proved a competent if not graceful partner, his concentration evident as he guided her through the patterns. During a particularly energetic turn, Charlotte caught sight of Noah entering the hall. He stood in the doorway for a moment, scanning the crowd until his gaze found her. Something in his expression, a fleeting look of longing quickly masked, sent a jolt through her that nearly made her miss a step. Everything all right? Nathan asked, steadying her with a gentle hand. Yes, just momentarily distracted, Charlotte assured him, forcing her attention back to her partner. When the dance ended, Nathan guided her to the refreshment table where punch and cookies were being served. Noah was now across the room, deep in conversation with Eduardo Mendez. Would you excuse me a moment? Nathan asked. Jim Perkins is signaling about something. Charlotte nodded, watching as Nathan made his way to where his ranch hand stood near the door. As she sipped her punch, Pastor Wilson's wife approached, engaging her in conversation about the upcoming wedding. We're so pleased Nathan's found happiness again, Mrs. Wilson said warmly. The ceremony will be simple, of course, but meaningful. Have you thought about your dress? Charlotte was explaining her arrangement with the local dressmaker when she became aware of someone beside her. Turning, she found Noah Garrison waiting politely for a break in the conversation. "Miss Zimmerman," he greeted her once Mrs. Wilson had moved on to other guests. "You look lovely this evening." "Thank you, Mr. Garrison." Charlotte fought to keep her voice steady. "Are you enjoying the social? Just arrived. Been checking fence lines all day after those rustling reports." Noah's gaze traveled briefly to where Nathan stood conversing with several ranchers. "Nate seems happy. Happier than I've seen him in years." The implied compliment warmed Charlotte. "He's been very kind. I'm fortunate in my situation." Noah studied her face for a moment. "And you? Are you happy with your decision?" The directness of the question startled her. "Yes, of course. Nathan is everything his letters promised." "Good." Noah nodded, though something in his expression suggested he'd heard more than her words conveyed. "That's good." An awkward silence fell between them. Charlotte searched for a safe topic. "Nathan mentioned you might join us for dinner next week at the ranch. I'm to practice my hosting skills before the wedding." "Did he?" Noah's mouth quirked in a half-smile. "I hadn't heard, but I'd be honored." Before Charlotte could respond, Nathan returned to her side. "Noah, glad you could make it," he greeted his neighbor warmly. "Any more news about Mitchell's problem?" As the men discussed the cattle rustling situation, Charlotte observed their easy camaraderie. It was evident they respected each other deeply, which only increased her guilt over her confused feelings. The remainder of the evening passed pleasantly, with more dancing and conversation. Charlotte found herself genuinely enjoying the community gathering, so different from the formal affairs she'd occasionally attended in Philadelphia. Here, everyone participated regardless of age or status, with children running among the dancers and elders keeping time with tapping feet. When Nathan escorted her back to the hotel, Charlotte felt a growing certainty that she could build a satisfying life in Wilcox. The people were kind, the land beautiful in its wild way, and her future husband a decent, honorable man. If only she could forget the way Noah Garrison's eyes followed her across a room. The following Wednesday, Charlotte spent the day at the Double G Ranch, preparing for the small dinner party Nathan had suggested. Mrs. Watkins helped with the cooking but deliberately stepped back to allow Charlotte to take the lead, recognizing this as an important step toward her future role. "Mr. Gray likes his beef medium rare," the housekeeper advised as Charlotte checked the roast. "And he takes honey in his coffee after dinner, though many find that peculiar." Charlotte absorbed these details eagerly, wanting to please Nathan with her attention to his preferences. She arranged the dining room with care, using the good china that had belonged to Nathan's first wife after seeking his permission, sensitive to the memories such items might hold. Nathan arrived from the far pastures in mid-afternoon, leaving time to clean up before their guests arrived. When he emerged from his room, freshly shaved and dressed in clean clothes, his appreciative glance at the dining room preparations gratified Charlotte. "You've made it beautiful," he said, touching one of the autumn leaves she'd arranged with candles as a centerpiece. "Mary would have approved." Charlotte had come to understand that these references to his first wife weren't comparisons, but Nathan's way of integrating his past with his future. Rather than feeling threatened, she found herself curious about the woman who had shared the beginning of Nathan's Western adventure. "Tell me about her," Charlotte requested softly, "if it's not too painful." Nathan's expression suggested surprise, then gratitude for her understanding. "She was strong, determined, followed me west when many women would have refused." He smiled faintly. "She hated the winters but loved spring on the prairie. Said it was like watching the world being born anew each year." Charlotte nodded, imagining the young couple facing the challenges of frontier life together. "And your son," pain flickered across Nathan's features. "Joseph." "He was 4 when the fever took them both." Nathan's voice grew husky. "He loved horses, would have made a fine rancher someday." Charlotte reached for Nathan's hand, squeezing it gently. "Thank you for telling me about them. They'll always be part of your life, part of this home." Nathan's fingers tightened around hers. "You're a remarkable woman, Charlotte Zimmerman." The moment of connection between them was interrupted by the sound of approaching horses. Nathan released her hand reluctantly. "That'll be our guests." Pastor Wilson and his wife arrived first, followed shortly by Noah Garrison and Harold Jenkins from the general store. Charlotte welcomed them with growing confidence, guiding them to the parlor where Nathan offered drinks before dinner. Throughout the evening, Charlotte found herself acutely aware of Noah's presence. Though he directed most of his conversation toward Nathan or Pastor Wilson, occasionally their eyes would meet, and Charlotte would feel that now familiar flutter in her chest. During dinner, the conversation turned to the upcoming wedding now just 8 days away. "The church looks lovely with the harvest decorations," Mrs. Wilson commented. "They'll serve beautifully for the ceremony as well." "Indeed," Pastor Wilson agreed, "though we're still hoping for a pianist. Mrs. Johnson's rheumatism is troubling her something fierce." "Charlotte plays," Noah said unexpectedly. When everyone turned to look at him, he added, "At least, I noticed you examining the sheet music at Jenkins' store last week." Charlotte felt the warmth of a blush rising in her cheeks. "I played a little in Philadelphia. Nothing professional, just for family enjoyment." "There's a piano in the parlor," Nathan said, surprising her. "It was Mary's. I'm afraid it's gone unplayed these past years." The dinner concluded with pie that drew compliments from all present. As Charlotte served coffee, she felt a sense of accomplishment. Her first hosting effort had gone well, a promising start to her future life as Mrs. Gray. Later, as their guests prepared to depart, Noah approached Charlotte while Nathan saw the Wilsons to their carriage. "You've made this house feel like a home again," Noah said quietly. "It's good to see." "Thank you," Charlotte replied, unsure how to interpret his tone. Noah hesitated, then added, "Nate deserves happiness. So do you." Before Charlotte could respond, Nathan returned and the moment passed. She watched from the porch as Noah mounted his horse and rode into the gathering darkness, his form silhouetted against the rising moon. Nathan stood beside her, his shoulder nearly touching hers. "Cold night," he observed. "Winter's coming early this year." Charlotte nodded, suddenly aware of the changing seasons. She had arrived in Colorado with autumn colors blazing. She would be married as the first snows threatened. "Charlotte," Nathan began, his voice uncertain, "I've been meaning to ask. That is, I hope you know that I don't expect." He stopped, collecting his thoughts. "Marriage brings certain obligations. I want you to know that I respect your feelings. We can proceed at whatever pace feels comfortable to you." Charlotte felt heat rise to her face, understanding his meaning. "Thank you," she managed, grateful for the darkness that hid her embarrassment. "You're very considerate." Nathan cleared his throat. "Well, I should see you back to town before it gets any later." The ride to Wilcox was quiet, each lost in thoughts of the approaching wedding and the changes it would bring to their lives. As the days passed, wedding preparations accelerated. Charlotte's dress was completed, a simple but elegant creation in cream-colored silk, adorned with lace that Mrs. Potter had contributed from her own treasured collection. The church was readied, and Mrs. Jenkins prepared a wedding cake as her gift to the couple. Nathan called daily, their conversation growing easier as they became better acquainted. He brought small gifts, a shawl against the increasingly cold weather, a book of poetry he thought she might enjoy, wildflowers gathered on his morning ride. Charlotte found herself responding to these attentions with genuine warmth. If her feelings lacked the passionate intensity she'd once dreamed of, they were nonetheless real and growing. 2 days before the wedding, Charlotte was arranging her belongings for the move to the Double G when Mrs. Potter knocked at her door. "Mr. Garrison to see you downstairs," the hotel keeper announced, her expression curious. "Says it's important." Charlotte's pulse quickened as she smoothed her hair and straightened her dress. She hadn't seen Noah since the dinner party, and his unexpected appearance sent a wave of nervousness through her. Noah stood by the sitting room window, hat in hand, his expression unusually serious. "Miss Zimmerman, thank you for seeing me. Is something wrong?" Charlotte asked, noting the tension in his stance. "Not wrong exactly." Noah gestured to a chair. "May we sit? I have something I need to tell you before the wedding." Apprehension tightened Charlotte's chest as they sat opposite each other. "Has something happened to Nathan?" "No, nothing like that." Noah leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "It's about Mary Gray." Charlotte frowned in confusion. "Nathan's first wife, what about her?" Noah's gaze held her steadily. "She was my sister." The simple statement hung in the air between them. Charlotte stared at him, trying to process this unexpected revelation. "Your sister," she finally repeated. "But why hasn't Nathan mentioned this?" "It's complicated." Noah sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Mary was older than me by 10 years. When our parents died, she practically raised me. Then she married Nate and they came west together." "And you followed them," Charlotte said, beginning to understand. Noah nodded. "I was 18, headstrong, wanted adventure. They let me tag along, helped me establish my own place once I'd learned enough." His expression softened with memory. "Mary was determined I'd make something of myself." "But why keep this connection secret?" Charlotte persisted, still confused. "After Mary and little Joseph died, Nate and we handled grief differently." Noah's voice grew rough. "I wanted to talk about them, keep their memory alive. Nate couldn't bear it. He withdrew, threw himself into work. For a while, we barely spoke." Charlotte thought of the easy friendship she'd witnessed between the men. "But you reconciled?" "Eventually. But by then, Nate had stopped acknowledging our connection, as if the reminders were too painful." Noah met her eyes directly. "I respected his need to cope in his own way. I still do." "Then why tell me now? Because you deserve to know the full truth before you marry." Noah's gaze was unwavering. "And because I need you to understand why I've kept my distance, why I must continue to do so." The implications of his words slowly dawned on Charlotte. "You mean?" "I mean that when I found you at that depot, something happened that I wasn't prepared for." Noah's voice dropped lower. "Something I had no right to feel." Charlotte felt as though the room had suddenly been deprived of air. "Mr. Garrison, Noah, please." His eyes held a plea. "Just once say my name." "Noah." The word felt intimate on her tongue. "We can't have this conversation." "I know." He stood abruptly, moving to the window again. "I'm not here to interfere with your wedding. Nate is a good man who deserves happiness. So do you." "Then why tell me this at all?" Charlotte's voice trembled despite her effort to remain composed. Noah turned back to face her. "Because secrets have a way of revealing themselves at the worst possible moments. Better you hear this from me now than discover it later and wonder what else might have been hidden." Charlotte rose, needing the physical activity to steady herself. "Does Nathan know you're here?" "No." "And he needn't know." Noah reached for his hat. "I've said what I came to say. What you do with the information is your choice." As Noah moved toward the door, Charlotte felt a desperate need to prolong the moment, to understand more clearly what was happening between them. "If circumstances were different," she began hesitantly. Noah stopped, his back to her. "They aren't," he said quietly. "And wishing otherwise only brings pain." After he left, Charlotte sat motionless for a long time, her thoughts in turmoil. Noah's revelation explained so much: the careful distance he maintained, the way his gaze sometimes lingered on her when he thought no one noticed, the pain that occasionally shadowed his eyes. It also cast her relationship with Nathan in a new light. Was she merely a replacement for what he had lost? A way to rebuild the family destroyed by tragedy? No, she whispered to herself, remembering Nathan's considerate treatment, his patient courtship. Whatever his motivations for seeking a mail-order bride, he had been honest in his dealings with her. That evening, when Nathan called to finalize wedding arrangements, Charlotte found herself studying him with new awareness. Should she mention Noah's visit? The revelation of their family connection in the end, she chose silence. If Nathan preferred not to acknowledge that relationship, forcing the issue would only bring pain. Perhaps in time, when their own marriage was established on firm ground, the subject might naturally arise. The day before the wedding brought an unexpected development. As Charlotte was finishing her packing, a telegram arrived from the Denver station master. A trunk bearing her name had been discovered in a storage room, apparently misdirected during her journey. It would be delivered to Wilcox on the afternoon train. "My books," Charlotte exclaimed when Mrs. Potter brought her the news, "and my mother's silver. I'd given them up for lost." The recovered possessions felt like a good omen, a final piece of her old life arriving just in time to be incorporated into her new one. Charlotte waited anxiously at the depot, Nathan by her side, as the train pulled in. The station agent helped unload the trunk, which showed signs of rough handling but appeared intact. Nathan arranged for it to be transported directly to the Double G. "A wedding present from fate," he remarked with one of his rare smiles. "Now you'll have more familiar things around you." That night, Charlotte's final evening at the hotel, a small group of Wilcox women gathered for a modest bridal celebration. Mrs. Potter, Mrs. Wilson, and several others shared advice, both practical and personal, about married life, some of it causing Charlotte to blush furiously. "Marriage is a partnership," Mrs. Wilson said sagely, "especially out here where survival depends on both husband and wife doing their part. And remember that men are like stoves," added Mrs. Jenkins with a wink. "They need regular tending but give the most warmth when properly handled." Laughter followed this pronouncement, along with more specific suggestions that left Charlotte both enlightened and mortified. As the gathering dispersed, Mrs. Potter drew Charlotte aside. "You've seemed distracted these past days," the older woman observed. "Having second thoughts?" "No," Charlotte answered quickly, perhaps too quickly. "Just wedding nerves, I suppose." Mrs. Potter patted her hand. "Natural enough. But if there's anything troubling you, best to resolve it before vows are exchanged. They're not easily undone out here." Charlotte nodded, though she knew her confusion couldn't be so easily resolved. She was committed to Nathan, appreciative of his steady character and the secure future he offered. Yet Noah's confession had awakened feelings she couldn't simply dismiss. "I've made my choice," she told herself firmly as she prepared for bed. "Honor it." Wedding day dawned clear and cold, with a thin layer of frost silvering the ground, the first real hint of the winter to come. From her window, Charlotte watched the sun rise over distant mountains, casting long shadows across the landscape that would now be her home. Mrs. Potter arrived with hot chocolate and toast, insisting the bride needed sustenance despite her nervous stomach. "Can't have you fainting at the altar," the hotel keeper declared. What a tale that would make! The morning passed in a blur of preparation. Charlotte bathed with scented soap, a gift from Mrs. Wilson, and carefully arranged her hair in a simple but elegant style. The wedding dress, when she finally donned it, transformed her reflection into someone both familiar and strange, a proper ranch wife, yet still Charlotte Zimmerman from Philadelphia. A knock at her door announced Mrs. Potter's return. "Your carriage awaits, my dear," the older woman announced. "And a fine sight it is, too." Charlotte looked out the window to see not Nathan's usual wagon, but a proper carriage decorated with autumn flowers and ribbons. Nathan himself stood beside it, more formally dressed than she had ever seen him, in a dark suit and crisp white shirt. "Borrowed from the Prestons," Mrs. Potter explained. "Their wedding gift to you both." Charlotte gathered her small bouquet of late-blooming wildflowers and took a deep breath. This was at the culmination of her journey, the beginning of her new life. Mrs. Potter escorted her downstairs and outside, where Nathan waited. His expression as he saw her in her wedding dress was everything Charlotte could have hoped for: admiration and tenderness combined. "You look beautiful," he said simply, offering his arm. The church was filled with nearly every resident of Wilcox and the surrounding homesteads. Charlotte walked slowly down the aisle on Nathan's arm, conscious of the curious gazes and approving smiles that followed their progress. Pastor Wilson waited at the altar, prayer book in hand. As they took their places before him, Charlotte allowed herself one glance at the congregation. Noah sat in the last pew, his expression carefully neutral as their eyes briefly met. The ceremony was brief and traditional. Charlotte spoke her vows in a clear voice, surprised by the emotion that welled within her as Nathan promised to cherish and protect her all the days of his life. When Pastor Wilson pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan's kiss was gentle and respectful, a promise rather than a passion. The celebration afterward was lively, with music and dancing spilling from the church hall into the street as the entire town participated in the festivities. Charlotte found herself passed from partner to partner during the dancing, each neighbor wanting a moment with the new Mrs. Gray. Nathan watched with evident pride, accepting congratulations and sharing in the community's good wishes. Only once did Charlotte see him in conversation with Noah, a brief exchange that appeared cordial if reserved. As the celebration continued into early evening, Nathan finally reclaimed his bride. "Ready to go home?" he asked quietly. Charlotte nodded, suddenly aware of the significance of this departure. They would return not to the hotel or to separate dwellings, but to their shared home as husband and wife. Their leave-taking was accompanied by good-natured teasing and traditional rice-throwing. The decorated carriage carried them away from town as the sun began its descent, painting the prairie in gold and amber hues. "Are you happy, Charlotte?" Nathan asked as Wilcox disappeared behind them. "Yes," she answered honestly. If her happiness was complicated by confusion, it was happiness nonetheless. "Very." Nathan covered her hand with his. "I'll do my best to be a good husband to you." The double G looked different as they approached, more permanent, more significant as the place that would now be her home. Lanterns had been lit along the drive and on the porch, a welcoming sight in the gathering dusk. Mrs. Watkins had clearly been busy in their absence. The house was spotless, with fresh flowers on the tables and a wedding supper keeping warm on the stove. More significantly, Charlotte noticed that some furnishings had been rearranged, creating space for her recovered trunk and the personal items she'd brought from the hotel. "Mrs. Watkins will come by tomorrow afternoon," Nathan explained as he showed Charlotte these thoughtful preparations. "She thought we might appreciate privacy until then." The implication hung in the air between them. Charlotte felt heat rise to her cheeks as she remembered the married women's advice from the previous evening. Nathan seemed to sense her nervousness. "I meant what I said before," he assured her. "We'll proceed at whatever pace feels right to you." Charlotte appreciated his consideration, recognizing the respect it demonstrated. Yet she was now his wife, with all the responsibilities that entailed. "I would like to change," she said, gathering her courage. "The dress is lovely but rather uncomfortable for an evening at home." Nathan nodded. "Of course. I'll see to the horses while you make yourself comfortable." Alone in what was now their bedroom, Charlotte slowly removed her wedding finery, her fingers trembling slightly on the buttons. She donned the nightgown and robe she'd carefully packed that morning, modest but made of fine material, a last extravagance from her Philadelphia life. When Nathan returned, Charlotte was seated at the dressing table, brushing out her hair. He paused in the doorway, watching her with an expression that combined admiration and uncertainty. "You're very beautiful," he said softly. Charlotte set down her brush and turned to face him. "Thank you for everything today. It was a lovely wedding." Nathan crossed to where she sat and tentatively reached out to touch a strand of her hair. "I never thought I'd have this again," he admitted. "A wife, a family someday, perhaps." The vulnerability in his admission touched Charlotte deeply. This man had suffered loss yet found the courage to reach for happiness again. Whatever complicated feelings she might harbor, she owed him her best effort to make this marriage succeed. Rising from the dressing table, Charlotte took Nathan's hand. "We're beginning something important together," she said. "I'm proud to be your wife." Nathan's kiss was more assured than it had been in the church, though still restrained. Charlotte responded with genuine warmth, allowing herself to be guided toward their marriage bed. Later, as moonlight filtered through the bedroom window, Charlotte lay awake beside her sleeping husband. Their wedding night had been more gentle than passionate, with Nathan showing consideration for her inexperience. If she had not experienced the overwhelming desire described in romantic novels, she had felt comfort and growing affection. It was a beginning, an honorable one. The rest would come with time and trust. Charlotte slipped quietly from bed and moved to the window, gazing out at the moonlit landscape of what was now her home. In the distance, a lone coyote called, the sound hauntingly beautiful in the still night. A movement caught her eye, a rider on the distant ridge, silhouetted against the starlit sky. Even at this distance, Charlotte knew it was Noah, patrolling his property line which adjoined the Double G. For a moment, she allowed herself to acknowledge the feelings his presence stirred, the unwelcome attraction, the connection she'd felt from their first meeting. Then, deliberately, she turned back to where Nathan slept. "I've made my choice," she whispered one final time. "Now I must honor it." Morning brought a new routine. Charlotte rose early to prepare breakfast, determined to establish herself as mistress of the household from the first day. Nathan seemed pleased by her efforts, lingering over coffee before reluctantly heading out to check on the cattle. "I'd stay if I could," he assured her, "but with those rustling reports we can't be too careful." "I understand," Charlotte replied. "I have plenty to keep me occupied arranging my belongings." After Nathan departed, Charlotte spent the morning exploring the house more thoroughly, learning its rhythms and quirks. She unpacked her recovered trunk, grateful for the familiar books and small treasures it contained. Her mother's silver found a place in the sideboard, while her books integrated with Nathan's collection on the shelves. By midday, she had begun to feel at home. The house was solid and well built, with thoughtful touches that made daily life comfortable despite the remote location. Mary Gray might have begun this home, but Charlotte could see her own influence taking shape within it. Mrs. Watkins arrived in early afternoon, bringing fresh eggs and congratulations. "The wedding was lovely," the housekeeper declared. "And you make a handsome couple, if you don't mind my saying." Charlotte accepted the compliment graciously. recognizing the older woman's approval as an important step in community acceptance. Together, they prepared a special dinner for Nathan's return, with Mrs. Watkins sharing recipes and household tips specific to ranch life. "Winters can be hard here," she advised. "Best to always keep extra supplies on hand. Never know when a blizzard might keep you housebound for days." When Nathan returned that evening, the transformation in the household was already visible. Fresh curtains hung in the kitchen, Charlotte's needlework graced the parlor, and the dining table was set with her mother's silver. "You've been busy," Nathan observed, taking in these changes with evident approval. "I wanted it to feel like our home, not just yours that I'm visiting." Charlotte smoothed her skirts nervously, hoping she hadn't overstepped. Nathan's smile reassured her. "It does. It feels right having you here." The days settled into a pattern. Nathan worked the ranch from dawn until dusk, while Charlotte managed the household and gradually took over duties previously handled by Mrs. Watkins. They established comfortable evening routines, reading by the fire, Nathan occasionally recounting his day's work, Charlotte sharing anecdotes from her previous life. Their physical relationship developed slowly but steadily. If Charlotte sometimes found herself thinking of another man in unguarded moments, she kept such thoughts firmly suppressed, focusing instead on building genuine affection for her husband. A week after the wedding, Nathan announced at breakfast that they would need to ride into town for supplies. "Winter's coming earlier than usual," he explained. "Best to be prepared." The trip to Wilcox would be Charlotte's first return since becoming Mrs. Gray. She dressed with special care in one of her new dresses, aware that the community would be assessing her transition to married life. Wilcox welcomed them warmly. Mrs. Potter beamed with approval as Charlotte described her household arrangements. Jenkins offered credit at the general store. "No need to pay today, Mrs. Gray. We can settle accounts at the end of the month," a mark of respect for her new status. As Nathan discussed feed prices with another rancher, Charlotte found herself momentarily alone in the store, examining bolts of fabric for winter curtains. The bell above the door jingled and Noah Garrison entered, stopping abruptly when he saw her. "Mrs. Gray," he greeted her formally, removing his hat. "You're looking well, Mr. Garrison." Charlotte nodded, her heart beating traitorously fast. "Thank you." "Married life suits you," Noah observed, his eyes taking in her appearance with careful restraint. "Yes," Charlotte replied softly. "Nathan is a good husband." Noah nodded, a shadow crossing his features. "I'm glad." They stood in awkward silence until Nathan's voice from the back of the store broke the tension. "Noah, didn't know you were in town today." Noah turned toward his brother-in-law with a smile that revealed nothing of his earlier discomfort. "Just picking up supplies. How's the new bull settling in?" The men's conversation turned to ranch business, allowing Charlotte to compose herself. This was how it would be, she realized. Periodic encounters managed with careful politeness, feelings buried beneath routine interactions. As they rode home that afternoon, the wagon loaded with supplies, Nathan mentioned Noah casually. "He's thinking of expanding his herd next spring. Might need help with the roundup." Charlotte murmured an appropriate response, keeping her gaze on the landscape. "The first snow will come soon," she observed, changing the subject. Nathan glanced at the darkening northern sky. "Yes, within the week, I'd say." That night, as they prepared for bed, Nathan approached Charlotte with unusual hesitancy. "I've been thinking," he began, "about the future, about family." Charlotte set down her hairbrush, giving him her full attention. "Yes." "I know it's early days yet," Nathan continued, sitting beside her on the bed, "but I want you to know that I hope. That is, when you feel ready. I would very much like children with you." The sincerity in his expression touched Charlotte deeply. "I would like that too," she replied honestly. Nathan's kiss was more passionate than usual, his hands gentle but purposeful as they moved to the buttons of her nightgown. Charlotte responded with growing warmth, allowing herself to be fully present in this moment with her husband. Later, as Nathan slept beside her, Charlotte reflected on the day's events. Her encounter with Noah had been painful but clarifying. The path forward was clear: building a life with Nathan, creating the family they both desired, finding contentment in the choice she had made. If occasionally her heart ached for what might have been, she would learn to live with that private sorrow. The predicted snow arrived 3 days later, earlier than usual for the season. Charlotte stood at the window watching fat flakes swirl down from leaden skies, transforming the landscape into a world of white. "First winter storms always special," Nathan remarked, coming to stand beside her, "though they lose their charm by March." Charlotte smiled, leaning slightly against his solid presence. These small moments of companionship were becoming more frequent, more natural between them. The snow continued for 2 days, keeping them largely housebound. Charlotte used the time to continue organizing the house, while Nathan worked in the barn or his small office, reviewing accounts and planning for spring breeding. On the third morning, they woke to brilliant sunshine reflecting blindingly off pristine snow. Nathan announced his intention to ride the property line, checking for cattle that might have strayed during the storm. "Will you be gone long?" Charlotte asked as she packed him a lunch. "Most of the day, likely," Nathan replied, pulling on heavy gloves. "Don't worry if I'm late returning." Snow makes everything take longer. After he departed, Charlotte busied herself with household tasks, but the silence of the house eventually drove her outside. Bundled in her warmest clothes, she walked the path Nathan had cleared to the barn, admiring the transformed landscape. The ranch looked like a scene from a Christmas card, buildings outlined in white, icicles hanging from eaves, snow blanketing fields that stretched to the horizon. Despite the cold, Charlotte felt a sense of peace in the profound silence that followed the storm. Her contemplation was interrupted by the distant sound of approaching hooves. Expecting Nathan's early return, she was surprised to see Noah's familiar form emerging from the tree line. He reined in his horse at the sight of her, clearly not expecting to find her outside. "Mrs. Gray," he called, approaching cautiously. "Is Nathan about?" "He's riding the property line," Charlotte replied, fighting the rush of feelings his appearance provoked. "Checking for strays after the storm." Noah nodded, dismounting but maintaining a respectful distance. "We had the same thought." "Found 3 of his steers mixed in with mine at the north boundary." Charlotte gestured toward the house. "Would you like coffee? It's bitterly cold out here." Noah hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you, just for a moment to warm up." Inside, Charlotte busied herself with the coffee pot, grateful for the simple task that allowed her to regain composure. Noah remained standing near the door, as if reluctant to fully enter the home. "Please sit," Charlotte invited, indicating the kitchen table. "The coffee will take a few minutes." Noah removed his hat but remained standing. "I shouldn't stay long. Folks might talk." "About a neighbor stopping for coffee after a snowstorm." Charlotte raised an eyebrow. "Surely that's innocent enough." A ghost of a smile crossed Noah's face. "Perhaps. But I'm trying to do the right thing here." "As am I," Charlotte replied softly. When the coffee was ready, she poured 2 cups and finally Noah relented, taking a seat at the table. They sipped in silence for a moment, the hot liquid bringing color back to their cold, numbed faces. "How are you finding ranch life?" Noah finally asked, his tone carefully neutral. "Different from Philadelphia," Charlotte admitted, "but satisfying in its own way. There's purpose to the work here." Noah nodded. "That's what Mary always said." She found it hard at first, the isolation, the physical demands, but eventually she couldn't imagine living any other way. It was the first time Noah had mentioned his sister so directly to Charlotte. "You must miss her very much," she said gently. "Every day." Noah's expression softened with memory. "She was the strongest person I've ever known. Even at the end, when the fever was at its worst, she was thinking of others, making me promise to look after Nate." "And you have," Charlotte observed, "despite your differences in grieving." Noah's gaze sharpened. "He told you about that?" "No," Charlotte admitted. "But I've seen how you watch over him even now. It's what family does." Noah set down his cup, his expression troubled. "I should go, thank you for the coffee." As he rose, Charlotte impulsively reached across the table, her fingers barely touching his wrist. "Why don't you tell him?" Noah looked down at her hand, then gently moved away from the contact. "Tell him what?" "That you still consider him family. That Mary's memory doesn't have to separate you." Noah shook his head. "Some wounds heal better left undisturbed." They walked to the door together, the brief moment of connection already fading. As Noah stepped onto the porch, he turned back suddenly. "Be happy, Charlotte," he said quietly. "That's all I ask. Be happy with him." Before she could respond, he mounted his horse and rode away, his figure gradually disappearing into the winter landscape. Charlotte remained on the porch long after he'd gone, the cold air bringing clarity to her troubled thoughts. In that moment, she made a decision. Whatever feelings might exist between her and Noah Garrison, they would remain unspoken. Her commitment was to Nathan, to the life they were building together, to the family they hoped to create. When Nathan returned that evening, Charlotte greeted him with genuine warmth, helping him remove his snow-covered outerwear and serving the stew she'd prepared. "Noah stopped by," she mentioned casually as they ate. "He found some of your steers along the north boundary." Nathan nodded, unsurprised. "Good of him to check. I'll ride over tomorrow and see if he needs help with his fences. Snow can be hard on them." As winter deepened, the rhythm of ranch life slowed. Days grew shorter and evenings by the fire longer. Charlotte found herself settling into marriage more comfortably than she had anticipated. Nathan proved to be a considerate husband, appreciative of her efforts and increasingly demonstrative in his affection. By Christmas, Charlotte had transformed the Double G into a true home. Handmade decorations adorned the mantelpiece, and the scent of holiday baking filled the kitchen. They hosted a small gathering for the ranch hands and closest neighbors, though Noah sent his regrets, citing a prior commitment in Denver. In January, as snow piled high around the ranch buildings, Charlotte missed her monthly courses. After a second month passed with the same result, she approached Nathan one evening as he sat reading by the fire. "I believe I'm with child," she said simply. Nathan's book fell forgotten to the floor as he stared at her in wonder. "You're certain?" "As certain as one can be without a doctor's confirmation," Charlotte replied, her hands instinctively cradling her still flat abdomen. "The baby should arrive in late summer by my calculation." Nathan rose and crossed to where she stood, his hands trembling slightly as he placed them over hers. "A child," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Our child." The joy in his expression erased any lingering doubts Charlotte might have harbored about her decision. This man, her husband, would be a loving father to their baby. What more could she ask from marriage? As winter reluctantly gave way to spring, Charlotte's condition became known throughout Wilcox. Well-wishers brought gifts of baby clothes and blankets, while Mrs. Watkins shared endless advice about childbirth and infant care. Nathan's protective instincts intensified as Charlotte's belly swelled. He insisted on hiring a young woman from town to help with household chores, concerned that Charlotte might overtax herself. "I'm pregnant, not ill," Charlotte protested, though she secretly appreciated his attentiveness. "Humor me," Nathan replied, kissing her forehead. "I couldn't bear it if anything happened to you or the baby." In the unspoken shadow of his first family's fate, Charlotte understood his fear. She accepted the help and tried to reassure him with her robust health and good spirits. Spring brought a flurry of ranch activity as calving season arrived. Nathan worked from dawn until well after dark, often returning so exhausted he fell asleep at the dinner table. Charlotte managed the household and tended a flourishing kitchen garden, her expanding waistline necessitating frequent rest periods that she accepted with increasing grace. During this busy season, contact with Noah was minimal. Occasionally, Charlotte caught sight of him riding the boundary line, or heard his name mentioned when ranchers gathered to coordinate roundup plans. She told herself it was better this way, distance healing what proximity might inflame. By June, Charlotte's pregnancy was well advanced, her movements slowed by the weight she carried. The baby was active, especially in the evenings, kicking and shifting as if impatient to greet the world. "Strong, like its mother," Nathan remarked one night, his hand resting on her rounded belly to feel the baby's movements. Charlotte covered his hand with hers, pleased by the genuine wonder in his expression. "Or determined like its father." As summer heat intensified, so did Charlotte's discomfort. Dr. Miller from the next town over confirmed her condition was progressing normally but advised rest during the hottest part of the day. "First babies sometimes come early, sometimes late," he advised, "but everything looks as it should." Nathan arranged for Mrs. Watkins to stay at the ranch in July, not wanting Charlotte alone during the day as her time grew closer. The housekeeper's practical presence was reassuring, her experience with childbirth a comfort as Charlotte's apprehension grew. The heat wave broke in early August with a magnificent thunderstorm that swept across the prairie, bringing cooler air and much-needed rain. Charlotte stood on the porch watching lightning illuminate the distant mountains, one hand supporting her lower back while the other cradled her enormous belly. "You should come inside," Nathan urged, appearing in the doorway. "That storm's moving this way." Charlotte smiled, enjoying the first comfortable temperature in weeks. "In a moment, the breeze feels wonderful." Nathan joined her on the porch, his arm sliding around her shoulders. "Any day now," he murmured. "I can hardly believe it." Charlotte leaned against him, grateful for his solid presence. "I'm ready, more than ready." As if in response to her words, Charlotte felt a strange sensation, a tightening across her abdomen followed by a rush of warm fluid down her legs. "Nathan," she gasped, clutching his arm. I think it's time." The next 12 hours passed in a blur of pain and determination. Mrs. Watkins took charge immediately, sending Nathan for the doctor while she prepared the bedroom and boiled water for clean linens. "First babies take their time," she assured Charlotte as contractions began in earnest. "But you're strong and healthy. Everything will be fine." Dr. Miller arrived by mid-morning, his calm presence reassuring as Charlotte's labor intensified. Nathan paced the hallway outside, occasionally permitted entry to hold Charlotte's hand between contractions. "You're doing beautifully," he told her, his voice steady despite the fear evident in his eyes. "Just a little longer." As afternoon faded toward evening, Charlotte's strength began to wane. The contractions came relentlessly now, each one demanding more than she thought she could give. "I can see the head," Dr. Miller announced finally. "One more big push, Mrs. Gray." Charlotte gathered her remaining strength, bearing down with a determination born of desperation. A sharp cry pierced the air, not her own pain, but the indignant wail of new life entering the world. "A girl," Dr. Miller announced, placing the squirming, vernix-covered infant on Charlotte's chest. "A perfect little girl." Charlotte gazed down at her daughter in wonder, all discomfort forgotten in the miracle of this tiny being, red-faced and angry but gorgeously, perfectly alive. "Nathan," she called weakly, "come meet your daughter." Nathan entered the room hesitantly, his expression transforming from anxiety to awe as he approached the bed. "She's so small," he whispered, gently touching the baby's clenched fist. "But strong," Charlotte replied, feeling the infant's surprisingly powerful grip on her finger. Like both her parents. As Mrs. Watkins and the doctor attended to the afterbirth and cleaned up, Nathan sat beside Charlotte on the bed, his arm supporting her as they both marveled at their creation. "What shall we name her?" he asked, his voice husky with emotion. Charlotte had considered many possibilities during her pregnancy, but now, looking at her daughter's delicate features, one name felt right. "Margaret," she said, "after my mother." Nathan nodded in approval. "Margaret Gray, it's a good name." He hesitated briefly. "Perhaps Mary for her middle name, to honor your first wife," Charlotte finished for him. "I think that's perfect." The gratitude in Nathan's eyes confirmed she'd made the right choice. "Margaret Mary Gray," he repeated softly. "Welcome to the world, little one." News of the birth spread quickly through Wilcox and surrounding ranches. Visitors came bearing gifts and good wishes, though Mrs. Watkins fiercely limited their time with the recovering mother and newborn. Pastor Wilson arrived to offer a blessing, followed by Mrs. Potter with a handmade quilt, and Jenkins with a rocking chair ordered specially from Denver. A week after Margaret's birth, Charlotte was sitting in that chair on the porch, enjoying the cool evening air while the baby slept in her arms. Nathan had gone to check on a heifer having difficulty calving, promising to return before dark. The sound of approaching hooves made Charlotte look up, expecting to see Nathan. Instead, Noah Garrison rode into view, leading a small pony on a lead rope. "Mrs. Gray," he greeted her, dismounting at a respectful distance. "I heard the good news. Congratulations." "Thank you, Mr. Garrison." Charlotte shifted slightly, allowing him a better view of the sleeping infant. "This is Margaret." Noah approached cautiously, his expression softening as he gazed at the baby. "She's beautiful," he said quietly. "Looks like you." "Nathan thinks she has his nose," Charlotte replied with a smile. "Though it's rather early to tell." Noah nodded, then gestured to the pony. "I brought her a gift. For when she's older, of course." Charlotte stared at the gentle-looking pony with its dappled coat and kind eyes. "That's very generous." "Every ranch child needs a good first mount," Noah said simply. "I'll leave her in your corral if that's all right. Of course, Nathan will be grateful." Charlotte hesitated, then added, "Her middle name is Mary." Noah's head jerked up, his eyes meeting Charlotte's with surprise. "Nate's idea. We decided together," Charlotte replied. "She was important to both of you." Noah swallowed hard, emotion evident in his face despite his attempt to control it. That would have meant a lot to her. An understanding passed between them in that moment, acknowledgement of the complex bonds that connected them all, of choices made and paths not taken. "Would you like to hold her?" Charlotte offered impulsively. Noah looked startled, then nodded. "If you don't mind." Charlotte carefully transferred the sleeping baby to Noah's arms. He held her with unexpected confidence, his large hands cradling her tiny form with gentle care. "Hello, little Margaret Mary," he murmured, his voice tender. "You're a lucky girl. You have good parents who love you very much." Margaret stirred slightly, her tiny mouth forming a perfect O as she yawned before settling back to sleep. The sound of another horse approaching broke the moment. Noah quickly handed the baby back to Charlotte as Nathan appeared around the bend in the road. "Noah," Nathan greeted him with surprise. "Didn't expect to see you here." "Just delivering a gift for the little one," Noah explained, gesturing to the pony. First mount 4 when she's ready." Nathan dismounted, examining the pony with appreciation. "That's mighty generous. Thank you." An awkward silence fell between the men until Charlotte spoke. "Noah was just admiring Margaret, said she looks like me." Nathan approached, peering down at his sleeping daughter. "She's got the gray nose, though," he insisted with a proud smile. "Poor child," Noah remarked, the gentle teasing breaking the tension. "Let's hope she grows into it better than you did." Nathan laughed, the sound startling in its unguarded joy. "Come inside for a drink." "We should toast the pony at least." Noah hesitated, glancing at Charlotte. "Another time, perhaps. I should get back before dark." As Noah prepared to leave, Nathan stepped closer, extending his hand. "Thank you again for everything." Noah clasped Nathan's hand firmly. "That's what family does," he said quietly. Charlotte caught the flicker of surprise in Nathan's expression, followed by understanding and then, remarkably, acceptance. "Yes," Nathan agreed. "It is." As Noah rode away, Charlotte felt a sense of completion, as if scattered puzzle pieces had finally found their proper places. Nathan came to sit beside her, his arm sliding naturally around her shoulders as they watched Noah disappear down the road. "He's a good man," Nathan said softly. "Mary would be proud of the man he's become." Charlotte leaned against her husband, their daughter sleeping peacefully between them. "She'd be proud of you both." 1 year later, Charlotte stood on the porch of the Double G, watching as Nathan demonstrated cattle branding techniques to a group of new ranchers. Margaret played nearby, her sturdy legs now confidently carrying her on explorations of the yard under Mrs. Watkins' watchful eye. The ranch had prospered, expanding its operations with new breeding stock and additional grazing land purchased from a neighbor returning east. Charlotte had established herself as a respected member of the Wilcox community, hosting social gatherings and serving on the church committee. Most importantly, she and Nathan had grown into a true partnership. The affection and respect that had characterized their early marriage had deepened into something Charlotte recognized as genuine love, different perhaps from the passionate romance of novels, but no less valuable for its steady warmth and reliability. Noah Garrison remained a presence in their lives, though always at a careful distance. He joined them for Sunday dinners occasionally and became Margaret's favorite uncle, bringing her small gifts and teaching her about horses as she grew. If sometimes Charlotte caught him watching her with a hint of what might have been in his eyes, they both acknowledged the boundary that would never be crossed. Their shared devotion to Nathan and Margaret provided purpose greater than personal desire. As Charlotte placed a hand on her belly, where a second child had just begun to make its presence known, she reflected on the strange journey that had brought her to this moment. A wrong depot, 3 days of waiting, and a chance encounter that had changed the course of her life in ways she could never have imagined. "Penny for your thoughts," Nathan said, approaching after concluding his demonstration. Charlotte smiled, taking his hand and placing it over the still, flat plane of her stomach. "Just thinking about beginnings and how they don't always look the way we expect." Nathan's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "Another baby. You're sure?" Charlotte nodded, enjoying his reaction. "Dr. Miller confirmed it yesterday. Early spring, he thinks." Nathan pulled her into a careful embrace, his joy evident in the way he held her. "I love you, Charlotte Gray," he whispered against her hair. "More than I thought possible when you stepped off that wagon a year ago." "And I love you," Charlotte replied, the words no longer difficult to say because they were true. Completely, honestly true. Across the yard, Noah looked up from where he'd been showing Margaret how to brush the pony he'd given her. His eyes met Charlotte's for a brief moment over Nathan's shoulder, a look of understanding, of acceptance, of letting go. Charlotte smiled at him, a smile of genuine friendship and shared purpose. Then she turned back to her husband, secure in the knowledge that she had found exactly where she was meant to be. The wrong depot had led her to the right life after all.